Hey, what's up guys? This is Anthony from AnthonysCustoms, and for this review, we're looking at the Figma SAMUS ARAN from Metroid Prime 3 Corruption, which is a figure that was a little bit contentious. At first, they showed the prototype, and it looked awful. It had absolutely terrible proportions and some really inaccurate details, and then they made a new one, and it looked pretty darn good. And now we have the final one, which looks mostly like that last one, and so it's a pretty good thing overall, but there are definitely some things we need to talk about. So let's go ahead and get it off the stand and take a closer look. This figure stands a whopping almost 6.5 inches. It's a little bit shorter, it's more like 6 3/8, which makes it pretty close to, let's say, 16.5 centimeters. Now here's the thing though about the height. I kind of lied, because right now I have the torso slightly extended, and it's not meant to do that. Here's how it works. I'm going to jump the gun and talk about the articulation just for a second, because it's kind of a big deal on this figure. What we have here is a socket in the lower torso, and then a ball hinge with a peg. Alright, and we'll go ahead and cover the fact that it has a ball peg at the top of that ball hinge, so that you know what we're talking about when we do the articulation. This is just a little floaty hinge piece. Okay, so we have that situation. When you peg this in all the way, it sits way too low. It just destroys the proportions. And I've checked against a bunch of artwork and in-game shots and everything that I could get, and it's definitely not accurate like this. It needs to be up just a little bit. It's almost like they just sunk that peg a little bit too far. So if you very carefully just lift it up a little bit, it's going to look a lot better. And you can go as far as you want, of course, and then you can still use the articulation because you're just moving that straight peg. But you can make it look a whole lot better by doing that. And if you don't do that, it does look a little bit weird. So it's technically a little bit shorter than what I showed you, but that's up to you if you want to do that or not. Okay, now before we get into anything else, let's just go ahead and get the accessories out of the way. We don't have as many as you might expect. We do have a few different hands for the left side. Of course, we have the fist hand, the thumbs up hand, the wide open hand, and the kind of relaxed hand. And they're all done very nicely. They all have a ball hinge connected to them, and then they peg into the wrist with a straight peg. So no problems there. For the right side, we do have the gun, but we do have two different tips for the gun. We have the standard one, and then the one that's for super missiles, I guess. I don't know. I never played Metroid Prime 3, so I'm not positive what the extension's for. Could be for the Freezy blaster, I don't know, but we have that. And then the only other accessory besides the display stand is the Morph Ball. Now the Morph Ball is done very nicely. It's not a solid block of plastic like the other Morph Ball was for the other SAMUS that we got from Other M, but it's still done well. It's painted nicely and has that metallic green, so no big deal there. It does have the peg hole for the stand as well. There's one thing I just noticed as I was taking the photos for this thing. Once you peg it in, or if you can just hold it by the green part somehow, it actually can spin, which is pretty useless, but still it's a really cool thing that they included that. I appreciate it. It's not like it's actually going to add any value other than it's cool that they did that. So I like that they made it actually spin. That's pretty awesome. So that's it for the accessories. You noticed we don't have a blast effect for this figure. There's no missile, there's no laser, there's no nothing, which is it's a kind of a bummer. I was really hoping we would get one. I was hoping they'd add one, even though it didn't say we were gonna get one. They didn't add one. Now, the good thing is it does have a peg hole in it, and I can only assume, since I don't have my other SAMUS with me, I can only assume that the other M SAMUS's blast effect fits into that peg hole. I so hope that's the case. I'm sorry I can't show you guys, but that is the thing. We don't have one. It's also worth noting that this doesn't have a very seamless finish. You can very easily see that separation there, so that's kind of a bummer. Okay, so let's talk about the paint before we get into this figure, because this figure's got some really unique engineering in a couple of places, and it's pretty cool. First of all, the figure is a more gold color than an orange color, which is accurate. That's how it looked in Prime 3 especially, so I'm very happy with that. It's got a very nice kind of satiny metallic finish. It's not hyper metallic. Looks very good. The gold here is a little bit more muted, got a little bit of an orange tint to it, but not too much. Looks very nice. The red, again, not hyper saturated. Nice metallic finish. And then we have the metallic green painted in here on the chest. And then throughout the body, we have these metallic green gems, and they're actually translucent plastic with metallic green behind them. So we have it there, we have some going down the leg here, some going down the leg here, more gem there, a gem in each hand. Are there more gems? Maybe not. Maybe that's it. But either way, that's a lot of gems, and it looks really, really nice. The visor, again, looks very nice, just like you want it to look. Very well executed. There's not a ton of paint on the rest of the figure because you don't really need it. It's all actually molded separate pieces, which looks fantastic. We do have a little bit of paint going on in the shoulder pad. You can see the recessed part is painted in this almost black, super dark gray color with the metallic green throughout, which is done very nicely, and it's continued throughout the entire shoulder pad, so it looks very, very cool. And then on the gun side, by the way, what is this? Does it have a name? Her blaster? I can't think of a name right now, and obviously I can't Google it right now, but does it have a name? Anyway, we have this shading from yellow to orange going through these recessed pieces, which looks very nice. And then, of course, there's yellow at the end. So, yeah, I mean, it's a really, really solid-looking figure. The only aesthetic issue that I really take, because obviously it's not going to be perfectly accurate 100% of the way, is that the torso is too squashed when you peg it down all the way. And if you're careful, you can just undo that. So I'm very pleased with the overall aesthetics. Even back here, they actually used separate pieces of plastic rather than just painting. So it's super clean, very, very well done. I love it. Very aesthetically pleasing. Okay, now let's talk about the articulation, because this figure is a doozy. It's got some really unique stuff, and I'm telling you right now, it's in the running for making the top 10 list. I know we're getting to that point, so it's on my mind, and this figure has some pretty cool articulation choices. The head, you're not going to believe this. You're not going to believe it. You might. There's a ball peg with a socket in it that holds the straight peg for the neck joint, which has a hinge on it, which has an offset ball peg on the top. And that's for the head and neck, because you can do this if you want to. I mean, you're not supposed to do that, but you can go ahead and push it down like that. But you can really move the head around however you want on this figure, and you can adjust the height however you want. So once you get it into the pose you want, go ahead and squish it down to the appropriate height, and you're going to be able to move the head no problem at all. The last SAMUS figure had almost no head movement because of obviously the shape of the helmet doesn't really afford it. So I'm going to show you how this is done. You have a floating neck piece, and then this is the socket. You see that? That's the socket that is a ball peg at the bottom. So this whole piece moves around. That receives the straight part of this ball hinge. And then you have this hinge, obviously, and then you have the offset ball peg at the top. No problem at all posing this thing. It's such a good design. And then the back of the neck, I don't know if you guys noticed that, the back of the neck is hollow on the floating piece. So you have no problem at all moving this thing around. And it's just really, really well done. Now, you guys should know by now that I'm generally a fan of just a double ball peg for the head on top of the neck. But the reason this complex system here is a better design is just simply because of the shape of the helmet. It would not afford you the proper range if you just made a double ball peg. So having this particularly complex system is just the right choice, I think. They did a fantastic job designing that. And now for the shoulders, we have it's actually a fairly simple design, but it's kind of complex in the way it's engineered. So if you guys remember the old SAMUS figure, it was basically a three-way ball peg. So it pegged into the torso, pegged into the shoulder pad, and pegged into the arm. And it's not too much unlike that, except you can see this piece of dark gray plastic has kind of like a split in it, and it's flexible. So we still have that three-way ball peg. So the shoulder pad, well, the whole arm moves around on the one ball peg that goes into the torso. That's simple. Shoulder pad is on another ball peg. So that just kind of flexes around, and that's pretty simple. But what they did for the arm down here, let me see if I can just pop it off to show you. Again, it's very simple, but it's very clever. So actually you might be able to see that. You can see the two different ball pegs and the way it just fits through. It's kind of dark, I know. There, I'll brighten it up a little bit for you. So hopefully you can see that three-way ball peg. But this time, the arm has a backwards offset socket, which at first I was like, that's crazy. What's the point of that? But here's the point of it. Let me peg it on and I'll show you. It's just so effective. I love that they did that. How did they think to put it on backwards? I don't know, but they did. So the arm can just hang there normally, no problem at all when you want it down straight. And when you go out to the side, because of that backwards socket, you can bring the arm, look at that, all the way up. Look at that, the biggest shoulder pad in the history of shoulder pads relative to the figure, and you have pretty much perfect range of motion. You can move this arm however you want. It's so well executed, and then you can actually rotate it around that socket too for your bicep swivel, but it doesn't, this is the only downside to the arms. The bicep swivel is kind of crooked, and it's very hard to pose. You only get a little bit, so when you bring the arm around for posing her like holding her blaster, you can't really do that effectively. It's kind of a bummer in that regard, but in all the other regards, it's really, really good. You can move this giant shoulder pad. You get the butterfly built into that range. You can raise the arm up, no problem. It's just so well done. I love that. I love it. And then we have a single jointed elbow, which gives you a little bit better than 90 degrees. And then we have a ball hinge for the wrists and a straight peg, obviously, like I showed you when I showed you the different hands. I already covered the torso articulation. It leans forward and back, obviously, since it's on that hinge. And if you want to, you can pop it off, turn that hinge, and then help it to lean side to side. But since it's offset, you can already kind of lean it side to side, so you shouldn't have too much trouble with that. I will say one of the issues with this figure is that the way the gun part starts after the elbow joint, it extends the arm just a little bit too long. You should actually have the elbow joint kind of recessed down in here to kind of shorten that arm a little bit, and that way when you bend it, it's not sticking so far forward. This should be back just as much as the elbow is sticking out, but it's not terrible, so that's okay. Now for the hips, we have our standard Figma 3-way ball peg, so they move around in there just as you would expect, but we have a bigger floating cap down here than we had for the other SAMUS, and then we still have the soft crotch piece, and then we also have a little hinged hip piece right here, so that it looks nice and seamless. You just get some panel lines in there, but it will move out a little bit to afford some extra range. Now the only downside about this is you still don't have that much range going out to the side. And the cool thing is, though, you can do this. You don't really need to do that, but it'll show you the articulation. We have the ball peg coming down, then we have the socket that pegs into the thigh, but that pegs in with a ball peg, which allows you to move the leg around on that. So you can rotate the leg around really nicely. Look how high you can get that, and it's almost perfectly straight. Really, really well executed hip joint in that way. And of course, you do have your thigh swivel, as you would want that. But going out to the side, still pretty limited. Not that SAMUS needs to do the splits or anything, but it is pretty limited. But then you can just pinch them up together, and you have a pretty seamless set of hips. And the hips don't lie. I heard that in a song once. So that's pretty good. Very nicely done. And then for the knees, we have our standard Figma joint, which not the best design in the world. It's a little bit ugly, but it's very functional. I think it would have been good for them to push that joint forward on the knee a little bit. That way it wouldn't stick out so far back here, and it would fill the gap in a little bit here, or maybe use a bigger joint or something like that. It's functional, but it's just not the best looking knee. And then lastly, for the ankle and foot, we have our standard Figma joint, which lets us go really far back and pretty far forward. And then we have a toe joint, which is a fantastic toe joint. Works no problem at all, and it's seamless. I don't know why it's so hard for companies to do this. All you need to do is make the hinge the same thickness as the foot. That way when it rotates, it's still flush down here, and they did that, so it's perfect. But wait, there's more. The ankle rocker is a perfect ankle rocker. Perfectly perpendicular to the leg. Look at that. Fantastic. So, the downsides on this figure is the torso is a little scrunched. If you need to fix that, you can. So that we're going to just kind of discount. For the arm, it's a little bit too long over here because of the way they did the articulation. Not the biggest deal in the world. It is an action figure, so we're going to live with that. The only real downside that remains is the hips can't go all the way out for splits, which is hardly important, and the bicep swivel's a little tricky to use when you're trying to bring the arm across the chest. Otherwise, you can just rotate the arm however you want to. So yeah, this figure is mighty impressive. It's almost like that first prototype was bad enough and they got such a huge amount of flack for it that they just rethought everything. Or they already thought of it and just didn't execute it well. I don't know. But this thing is just very, very well done. So good. So yeah, I definitely recommend it. And that was a really long review. But yeah, it's a good one, guys. You definitely want to pick this up. Definitely. If you're a Figma collector, if you're a Nintendo collector, if you're a Metroid collector, if you're a Smash collector, if you're a collector of cool things, This hits all of those things. Definitely get one. Thanks for watching, guys. We're going to call it there. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I have new videos up every single day. We talk about action figures, movies, TV shows, video games, all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure you come back for that. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. And in the meantime, keep collecting.